One of the more successful farms out there in the market gardening space right now is Neversink Farm in Claryville, New York. That farm is ran by farmer Conor Crickmore and his wife Kate, and today you're going to find out 3 tips from Conor to help a new and beginning farmer become more successful. Stay tuned for those tips coming up. Neversink Farm is an amazing place. It's a farm I visited, and the farmer who's running it, Conor Crickmore, is somebody who I've talked to half a dozen times over the past few months. What Conor is doing there at Neversink in Claryville with his wife Kate is nothing short of amazing. On around 1.5 acres of production space, that farm grosses over $300,000 per year in revenue. That's not due to accident, that's not due to happenstance, it's due to the way that Conor farms. He's put in a lot of hard work, and he's been very strategic and systematic with how he's gone about putting in that hard work as the farm has changed and evolved over time. I recently had the pleasure of sitting down to interview Conor for the podcast, which airs tomorrow, and you can see that right here on YouTube. During the course of that interview, he dropped a lot of knowledge, and I want to distill down 3 specific things that I think can help new and beginning farmers get a better start. These aren't necessarily my lessons, they originated with Conor, but I'm going to take what he said and give you my take on it and expand upon it. I hope they help. Tip number 1, start small. Think about how much land you want to farm, cut it in half, and then start there. You can always grow bigger into the future. This is a point Conor made really well in the podcast. The whole idea here is if you go too big at the beginning, you're going to be overwhelmed, or something is going to overwhelm you. Maybe that's production, maybe that's weeds. You're not going to be able to stay ahead of it all as a new and beginning farmer. When you're starting out, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. So you need to approach your startup enterprise in a systematic way, in a strategic way, one that makes success easier to come by. If you throw too much at yourself and try and do too much at day 1, it's going to be really hard because you'll just be overwhelmed with it all. Think about that video I did on how many balls can you juggle. For a beginning farmer, you're already juggling a lot of balls at any given time. Think about what you have to do when you start up a farm. You have to be a marketer, you have to be a salesman, you have to be a grower, you have to be an accountant. You have to be just a general business owner. Maybe you're a manager of employees. Maybe you're a responsible citizen in your community. There's a lot happening. Any one of those things could be a job for somebody else. Some people just grow crops, some people just sell crops, some people just market crops. As a very small farm, you have to do it all. That means your time that you thought you had, that you thought was this big, is actually going to get compressed down to about this big. How many of those things can you juggle at once? Probably not many. A lot of people just can't do it all. One way to make it easier to try and do it all is just to scale down what you're doing. Start on a very small land base. Start on a very small production area. Start with a very small amount of customers. Start with a very small amount of crops. That way you can focus on that small amount and do it really well and improve it and get better and better over time. If you stretch it out too much, you can't put enough effort into doing everything. If you don't believe me, look at some of the market gardeners out there who are doing 1.5 acres. Ask them if they could do it by themselves when they started out, and I'm pretty sure every single one of them would say, I could do it by myself, but I couldn't do it well. Don't ever start this big. Start small, focus on what you're starting on, do it really, really well. Get good at it, and then expand out from there. That's tip number 1 from Conor Crickmore. Now tip number 2. On a small land base, you can't grow everything. Grow what's profitable. A lot of times the temptation when you start out farming is just to grow it all. You think your customers want it all, or you want to grow it all, or you think quinoa is really awesome and you'd love to grow that, or some exotic variety of celery or eggplant. You have to grow what's profitable in your land base. If you think about what Curtis Stone talks about, it's about getting the most value per production space. How much value can you get out of each linear foot in your production beds? When you're starting out, that's what you have to focus on. It's not all about the economics, it's not all about the money, but if you're a starting farm, it's mostly about the money, because you have to have a business that's sustainable and one that scales and one that keeps you working in the farming business if you're going to grow and do bigger things. Maybe that's a communal cause, maybe that's research unique varieties, maybe that's just have fun with it all. You gotta start small, and you have to start in an area that generates cash right away. This is a point that gets lost on a lot of people. I've seen it in workshops that I've been in. Conor made this point in the interview that we did. Focus on what's profitable first. You can always grow a small patch of your own stuff for experimental purposes or your own home garden or your own use. Do that on the side. Keep it like 5% of your total production. But your main production, focus on what is most profitable given your land base. If you're following his tip number 1, starting small, you already don't have a lot of land to begin with. So what you need to think about is, if I only have X acres of land, what crops can I grow that are going to make those X acres profitable now? That's going to take a lot of strategy, because if it's something like 1/8 of an acre, you're not going to be growing potatoes or sweet corn or watermelon. That's not going to work for most people. So you're going to have to find what can you grow on that 1/8 of an acre that is most profitable. Tip number 2 from Conor: don't just grow everything, grow what's profitable. Tip number 3 for beginning farmers from Conor is deal with weeds early. Now this has 2 applications. 1, early in the development of your land, and 2, early in the production cycle of each crop. Let's take these in order. Number 1, early in the development of your land. If you're starting on a brand new piece of land, the best thing you can do is deal with your weeds at the time when you establish that land. That may mean passively dealing with them and putting in a bunch of time, if you can, ahead of time, to stale seedbed or tarp the whole plot. Just get a piece of plastic, something darker in color that light can't penetrate. Don't use white. Black plastic works great. Lay it down over an area, let it sit there for a full year. That's how long Conor lets it sit there. And that, what it does is it bakes all the weed seeds underneath that plastic. Everything rots, and you end up with a nice area that is hopefully more weed free than if you just tilled that area in. If you don't have the time to do that, the other strategy would be go in and either use a dozer maybe and try and scrape a lot of that stuff off, or go through and, if you do till it in, try and pull every rhizome, every weed you can as much as possible. You need to try and plan ahead, not rush into this, and deal with weeds early. These passive techniques are great. They usually have pretty good success in dealing with a lot of perennial weeds. The whole idea here is to spend a bunch of time up front prepping this plot, even if it's passively, so the future you, the you of next year or the you of 2 years from now, doesn't have to deal with tons of weeds in your carrots or your salad mix. The time spent up front will pay dividends down the line. You may think, I don't have time to let it sit for a full year. Well, maybe you don't, but you're probably not going to have time either to spend 4 hours a week every single week of the production season weeding either. Which one is going to be worse, starting now and doing it passively, or actively having to do it in the middle of the season when it's hot out and when you have 500 other things to do? If you're going to do this, think about the most passive way you can do that. Maybe that's starting on an active plot while you have a passive one going, and then eventually abandon the active plot, switch over to the passive one that's had the solarized weed control, and then tarp the active plot. Be smart about it. In terms of dealing with weeds early, this is point number 2. The other way that that phrase has meaning: deal with weeds early in the production cycle, meaning it's a lot easier to control weeds that are at the thread stage, that are this big, than it is to control weeds that are 3 feet tall and going to seed. One thing that Conor stressed at the physical in-person workshop that I went to, that he hosted, was every single weed grows up to be a bigger weed, which then grows up to put down seed, which turns into new weeds. The whole idea here is you need to break that cycle. The passive method that we talked about before hopefully destroys a lot of weed seeds and weeds in that seed bank, so you don't get those weeds starting. But the weeds that do survive, the weeds that do blow in, you want to eliminate them at a really small stage. There's a lot of really cool tools you can help to do this: wire weeders, collinear hose, tine rakes. All these tools can help, but they really work best when the weeds are really small. That's the key here. Get the weeds when they're small. As you start to do this throughout the season, you should see your weed pressure mitigate over time. The curve should go like this. As the season goes down, your work into weed control should go down. It shouldn't go up. I've been on enough farms and talked to enough farmers to know that once weeds get out of control, it's very hard to get them back into control, because as the weeds take off, so does the production season, and so do the demands on your time. Stay ahead of the weeds, both early in plot development and early in the production cycle. And whether you're a beginning farmer or an existing farmer, I guarantee that'll make your life easier. These are 3 tips that came out of the most recent podcast that I did with Conor, Farm Small, Farm Smart, episode number 118. For more information on that, see the link below. That'll be posted on YouTube here tomorrow. One other thing, if you want to learn more from Conor just came out with an online course with 200+ lessons where he teaches everything that he does at Neversink. It's good for beginning farmers. It's good for farmers who've been in production. You're going to learn all the systems, strategies, and techniques that Conor uses at his farm in Neversink, things like task tickets, weed control, how he does seed starting, how he does cultivation. There's a lot in there. Things like marketing, I think, can directly help your farm right away, and that means those techniques can help pay for the cost of the course itself. To learn more about their course, visit the link below. It's Neversink's Market Farming Online course. Check it out. I think it's going to be worth the money, and I think you're going to be able to get a lot out of it, because I really think that Conor has a lot to offer this space, and he's taking some of this content out there to a new level. Once again, link for the course below. If you want to hear from Conor on the podcast, look for that video coming up on YouTube, or link to the podcast below. That's a free resource. There's tons of information in there. Enjoy them both. Thanks for watching this one. Until next time, be nice, be thankful, and do the work.